Hello, everybody. It's Emily Slavic here again. Excited to have you hop back on here this morning. So excited to have you here on the Algo series. As many of you know, we've been seeing many videos coming out, and I'm excited to keep sharing and telling you more about Algo. And for those that are newer and haven't heard about Algo, we are a supply chain intelligence company. So we help suppliers and retailers with optimizing and executing and planning their supply chain. And on top of that, we have integrated professional services, so lots of experts to help on top of some enabled analytics platforms. So that's a lot to talk about, lots of capabilities, many series to come to unpack that. But today I am excited to share that we have David Warrick here attending. He's our featured guest. He's going to tell us a little bit about the Microsoft case study of all of the goodies I was describing and how we've applied it here with Microsoft's partnership. He was the former supply chain global general manager and technology officer. So I hopefully got that right there. But
yes,
really, really excited to have him here today so we can talk a little bit about, all of those concepts and solutions that we have and our partnership that we have made with Microsoft. So with that, welcome, and would love to maybe just hop right in and get started if you don't mind. If you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the pain points of Microsoft that you are seeing within supply chain, that might be a great place to start.
Thanks, Emily, and also thanks for inviting me along this morning. It's always good to talk about supply chain, so I really appreciate the invite. I think that the pain points are, from a Microsoft perspective, we're pretty much the same as what the industry is experiencing right now. Supply chains were really built to sense and respond, and that traditional approach of getting the data always in a latent mode and then figuring out what happened and then trying to decide what to do with that was kind of the problem. And we really wanted to switch that up to be less of sense and respond and more of anticipate and act. And that switch of kind of moving from looking backwards to understanding what is happening now and looking forwards was really the key element. I think the S&OP process, forecasting by definition is going to be inaccurate. And what we were finding was, especially over the last couple of years with the pandemic, that our supply chain had shifted, our consumption from a consumer perspective had shifted, and we needed to understand what was happening right now. We needed to understand what was happening on a daily basis to be able to make those instant decisions to move inventory to the right location and make sure that we were satisfying as many of our customers as we possibly could.
So great take. I would say, that pain point that you're describing is similar to what we hear from a lot of customers in supply chain of, we want to be more proactive, but the data is in different places. It's in different systems. It's hard to access it. And, I'm in charge of supply chain. Why do I have to deal with data? But it seems like it goes hand in hand with, trying to be able to make decisions and really proactively plan, as you were stating. So maybe my next question would be, why Algo? Or, why maybe was that need not fulfilled internally or with other competitors, and what kind of led you down the Algo path?
I mean, I think it's a great question, and it's one that actually I get asked quite a lot in the industry in terms of, why did you choose this company, or why did you decide to partner with this company? For Algo, from my perspective at the time, it was really around the fact that, look, when you're in Microsoft, obviously everybody wants to work with you, and lots of companies come in and they're great solutions and they're fabulous people. What happens is those early conversations are super important, and it's very easy for a service provider to come in and say, hey, here's our solution and this is what it can do. But the difference with Algo was in those very first meetings with I think with you and with Amjad at the time, the conversation was around, what are your problems? And I just felt that was inspiring at the time. It was very easy for you to come in and try and sell a solution, but instead you come in and the first questions that you asked me were not what I was, what I was trying to fix or why I was talking to Algo, it was, what are the problems? What are the problems that you're facing right now? What are the real challenges? And we were able to have a discussion about those challenges before anybody mentioned a solution or a fix or what that would look like. And I find that that type of early conversation just builds a great partnership, whereby it's not about trying to buy a solution or sell a solution. It's about really, you wanted to, Algo wanted to understand my pain points. Algo wanted to understand what it is that was keeping me awake at night, the things that I was really struggling to fix. And that led into a very rich conversation of how the industry was thinking, a different perspective on those pain points, and then started to talk about, okay, well, this is how we could think about the intelligence perspective. This is how we think about machine learning and artificial intelligence to actually turn that data into something rich. We always talk about actionable insights, and getting those actionable insights from a huge amount of data is actually more challenging than you think. And so having a company come in that understood supply chain, that understood what we were trying to do and the pain that we were really feeling at the time was just refreshing. And it's not to say that there aren't other great solutions out there. There are a multitude of great solutions, but I always think that it's the partnership and it's the way that companies work together really unleashes the value.
I love that answer. That makes me so happy to hear that piece, because asking, partners, I would say, I don't like to call them customers, because we think of everybody more as partners and kind of an extension of the different companies that we work with, to understand the problem. And to be honest, it's not even that first discussion. It's every other week we are talking about, okay, what are the challenges of today? Because they're going to be different than what they were 6 months ago. And how do we stay in lockstep with what your challenges are now, and configuring our solutions, whether it's the expertise support or it's the actual, end analytics and platform to really help you. So I love that. That's great to hear. That's why we stood out. Maybe another question.
It actually, it came from something that was internal in Microsoft. Supply chain is, it was always, it used to be almost a necessary evil, whereby you had to have a supply chain. Just if you were making products, you had to have a supply chain. And the way that the organization, that I was leading at the time, the way that we tried to spin that even internally was, we want to care more about everybody else's business than they do. And that was kind of quite a hard cultural shift, but it started to make sense. And when you're working even internally in a large company like Microsoft, and you're seen to be continually driving for that next level, that next generation, and you really care and understand everybody's business that you're supporting, it makes a difference. And again, from an Algo perspective, that's what I caught. I mean, I know that you were staying awake at night worrying about the things that were impacting my business, but not only do I appreciate that, I think it's the way forward. I think that this is, supply chain is all around collaboration. It's all around being able to have those different parts working together in harmony. And I think that the way that Algo approach the business is exactly like that. You actually care about my end result as much as I do. And I think that that's really, really a fantastic characteristic.
Yep, no, that's great. And as you were pointing out, whether those KPIs are forecast accuracy or in-stock percent or certain costs that you're, working towards, those KPIs are Algo's KPIs once we hop into that partnership. And so you're so right. And we're tracking those and figuring out how we can best help. So, definitely resonates with me. Maybe my other question is, what were you, and you talked a little bit about this, but, what did Algo fulfill the promise of those early conversations, or maybe what was even above and beyond what you had anticipated with a partnership like that? Maybe what are some of those key points there?
I think that we weren't 100% sure what it was we were trying to achieve. And I think that Algo really helped us start to understand the data in a different way. Some of the solutions, as we were looking at the vast landscape of retail, and we were looking at, even the way that when you have a big retailer like a Best Buy or a Walmart, and they have thousands of stores across the country, we hadn't thought about the concept of anomaly detection, looking at the run rates in those different stores, and then noticing if something was changing on a daily basis. It was insights like that to be honest, we hadn't even got our heads around as we started to work with Algo and actually start to pull that intelligence out. I think one of the standout pieces for me was, and I remember the conversation, and we said, look, obviously we're pumping everything into Power BI. And that's Microsoft's visibility layer, really great product. But we were starting to get concerned because there was so much data pumping in there, and we were looking at the number of dashboards and the number of different iterations of data that we were creating, and we were concerned that if this is too complex, it's just going to be another set of things that people will get excited about for the first 5 minutes, and then it will become a chore. And so I remember having the conversation, and the concept came up from the Algo team of, well, what if we were to introduce a bot? And what if that bot was to reside in the team's environment? And I remember going, I'm not sure that, why has Microsoft not done that already? Isn't there a solution for that? And the team went away and developed it in a very short space of time. And this is one of the things that, again, I love working with companies that are growing at the pace of Algo, because everything is instant. Everything happens in a very, very short timeline, a very quick cycle. And so we had this crazy idea. The Algo team went and put it together, and it was just groundbreaking. We were sitting in the team's environment as a Microsoft former employee. We spent a lot of time in Teams, and suddenly in that Teams environment, you were able to call on the Algo bot and ask it a question, leveraging NLP, and it could be as simple as, what is my current out of stock in Best Buy? And the bot then went back into the Power BI, grabbed that information and brought it into the Teams chat window. So in the world of online working and trying to build these collaborative environments, the fact that the bot was able to bring that into the chat window, so as you and I are sitting having a conversation, we would then be able to actually look at that information live. But it wasn't just a cut and paste. You could then click into that data and then cut and splice it whatever way you wanted. So it became a conversation. And I think what that was for me was, it was changing a product into an experience. And that experience was incredibly rich, because it meant suddenly we didn't need to train people. Suddenly we didn't need to worry about how complex we were organizing the data in the background, and we made it accessible to everyone. And of course, that got us thinking about, well, what are the other areas here? We've got a transport management system, a warehouse management system, all of these other supply chain tools, which to a certain extent suffer from that. If you're not trained in the use of them, it's difficult to figure out. And so the ability to then leverage the bot across multiple different data streams and different environments just seemed like a fascinating way forward. I retired before I got to actually do that, but I left the foundational stones. And now, as I'm working back in the industry and talking to a lot of different companies, it's the thing that I'm really pushing, which is, look, you don't need to go and re-architecture everything that you've ever built. You can now layer technology on top of your existing stack, if you like, and be able to really drive this intelligence layer. And so the fact that the Algo brand is all about supply chain intelligence just resonates. But that was that's my best example. Something that made me sit up and go, yep, this is where the next stage is.
No, I love that. And I think we often get that, the pain point is, we don't have visibility to the data. We want to be more proactive. We want digital transformation, but we don't know where to start. And we haven't gone through this full journey before. And since Algo has helped several partners go through that journey, we have a playbook, if you will, of these are the right steps to take. This is where we think we will give you, value quickly, where you can start achieving those KPIs. And these are the steps and the building blocks that are in place to kind of get you where you need to be along that path and kind of hold hands together as we go through that digital journey, because it's definitely a journey and it keeps iterating as the business changes and as there's more kind of complexities that come into play. The other piece that I love is just your description of the Algo bot, if you will, and just that collaborative experience. I think that is a game changer. That's definitely a piece that gets me excited to be able to, almost like the Siri of your business or something of that nature, to ask questions, and not just that one-on-one, but in group settings, as you were mentioning. So pretending like you're in a group with a meeting, I can, tag my boss or tag a partner or a coworker and say, hey, look at this information. What are your thoughts here? And truly have a collaboration, within teams where I'm working all the time. So yeah, love that that element of our solutions coming to life right now.
And it is a rich experience. It is, I mean, the nature of work has changed to a certain extent, partly driven by the last few years. But it also, this is, as we think about the future and as we think about the next steps, there is going to be more data. I mean, the amount of data that's being produced and is now being able to be captured is continuing to accelerate. And so finding the right ways of pulling intelligence from that data is going to continue to be important. And we live in a world of instant gratification. We don't have time for anything. And so being able to make that data accessible to anybody who needs to use it is just critical. And so that's why I think it's just such a great example of how technology can really accelerate progress.
Yep. And I think my last question is just more of, what do you foresee in the future for supply chain? You touched a little bit on, Algo sits on top of ERP systems. It's not, replacing is kind of one piece. And then, what you were just noting now, quick access to data. Anything else that you see in the future, or elements you would want to think about or talk about?
I mean, I think that I don't know if I would call it the supply chain renaissance, but there's a huge shift happening in the industry where companies have been really working hard with their ERP systems for years, and the pace of change from a consumer behavior perspective, from a supply chain challenge perspective, is really challenging to keep up with. And we don't always have time to continue to try and augment that SAP or Oracle or whatever ERP system instance. And so the prospect of being able to layer solutions on top of those, you still need to have an ERP, and it's a critical part. It's a transactional based system. It's usually your core financial system. That doesn't go away. It's not a rip and replace, but it's more about finding these clever ways of augmenting that solution that you've invested so much time, energy, and money in. And I think the future is definitely about starting to layer those technologies on in all different aspects of supply chain. The instant access and the gratification piece is going to be important, but then also things like robotic process automation, being able, supply chain is a heavily transaction focused business. And so being able to automate a lot of those transactions to enable the intelligence layer is going to be a key part of it as well. We're going to see a lot more automation from a physical standpoint, autonomous trucks, self-driving, all of those great things. Blockchain is going to play a part in some respect, but again, it's all about how do you harness the data and how are you able to then leverage that harnessed data to be able to do something really clever with it. And so I think I had a great chat with a startup a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking, deep supply chain, if you like. And we came away from the conversation and we said, for so long, people have thought that fixing supply chain is all about the physical. It's all about distribution centers and warehouses, fulfillment centers, return centers, trucks, trailers, all of those good things. But really, when you look at it, it's a software problem. It really is, because we have all of this, everything that moves anywhere in the supply chain creates a data feed. And so the real change that is going to happen, and the real next step for supply chain, is going to be around intelligence. It's going to be around, what do you do with all of this data? Because optimizing inventory isn't about guessing. Optimizing inventory is about understanding all of the different nodes in your supply chain, where you're consuming, where you're not, and then being able to understand what that signal should be to a manufacturing hub or to a distribution hub. That is not a physical problem. That is actually a data problem.
Yep.
And so I think that, you know, and I will call it the supply chain renaissance, but this is now, it's actually happening, and more people in the industry are really starting to understand that the next investments are not going to be in building more distribution centers. They're actually going to be in optimizing all of the data that I'm producing on a every hour in my supply chain to figure out it's a software problem. And what a fabulous time it is for companies like Algo to be able to step in and actually push the industry forward.
Excellent. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think I see that similar pain point too, that it's a data problem. And I think the problem that even is related to that too is internally, there's usually silos between supply chain and internal IT teams, for example. They speak different languages, they have different, focus areas. But at Algo, we kind of help bring those teams together. And that's part of our playbook, if you will, whether it's the supply chain expertise or the technical expertise, and making sure everything is joined and kind of translated for all of those different teams. So it's kind of an added benefit beyond just the software is really the teams that have been operators. A lot of people at Algo have worked in supply chain or have been a buyer or have been in sales, which just adds more color to our culture and understanding that it's not just software, it's people and data and software all together, and kind of marrying it to be able to solve problems. So excellent.
And I think that's a great point. I think it's a great point, Emily, because part of the challenge is that there is a general fear of technology. And so making that first step, when you're talking to people who are supply chain experts and practitioners, and having those early conversations, it's incredibly important, because it just means that the conversation is an understanding conversation. Right back to my first conversations with Algo, they were so rich because I was talking to supply chain people who understood exactly how supply chains are supposed to function. And that meant that I didn't have to do an education piece of it. It was all, it made sense in a very short space of time. So thank you for all of that.
Yes. No, and thank you for joining me here today. This was definitely a pleasure. I look forward to, future conversations. And I would say the viewers, if you're interested in having a further discussion with myself or with the Algo team, feel free to message us right on LinkedIn, or you can also go to our website, algo.com/contact, and fill out a little form there, and we will get in touch with you. So with that, excellent. Thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to some future conversations with you.
Thank you, Emily. It's been my pleasure.
Have a great day.
You too.